Today I'm working on a set of gauges for a 70 Challenger. This is a standard set of gauges like most of them have. But anyway, I went ahead and opted to put some nicer gauges than what came from the factory. I went with the ones from Speed Hut where you can customize your gauges. You can get where the pointers light up. You can change the fonts, the spacing, the sweep, whether it's 90 or 270 sweep. And you can change the colors, whatever you want to do. Totally customizable gauges. All you do is call Speed Hut, tell them what you want, and they'll make them. They'll custom make them for you. This whole set of gauges was approximately about $750 for all of them. And I got the fuel, I got the oil, the water, the voltmeter, and I bought a speedometer. This is a GPS speedometer, and it has a tachometer built in it. So it works totally off of GPS. You don't have to worry about having special sending units for your transmission. It'll work on any car. You put the antenna up there and it'll tell you your speed. Very reliable. You can't hardly beat them. Like I said, for the money, $750. That's a nice set of gauges, and it'll look good in this car. Versus the other option is to buy a set of $2,500 RT gauges that you spend a lot of money on and may or may not work, or you'll spend a fortune getting them redone, and they're very fragile. And to me, I just assume have custom gauges. But my deal was I wanted to look stock. Even though I have custom gauges, I just didn't want a flat piece of metal going across the front of the car like a race car with gauges mounted in it. I wanted to use the stock housing here that I have and try to retrofit these gauges so it'll fit right back in the car just like the original gauges did. So it took a little bit of effort, and today I'll show you how I did it. First of all, this is your stock cluster panel here. I didn't have to do any modifications to that. Left it just like it was out the car. Just gonna have to clean it up, redo the silver on it maybe, or something like that. Second, on the gauges, you have your clear lens. You take that off. It's held in by 7 pins. Then on the back of the cluster, it's made out of pot metal. So what I had to do, I had to enlarge all the holes in the back here. You have all for the 4 factory gauges. I enlarged all of them, cut it all out so that the new gauges will fit in there. And then for the Speedo, you had to cut out quite a bit of area in here, and then I overcut, so I had to make me a plate to put back in here to cover it up. I tried several different options and they didn't work. So anyway, so that was an easy fix. Once I painted all black, you'll never see any of that. But I'll show you later in the video how it turned out. It looks really well. Anyhow, so then after that, I made me a plate out of some 16 gauge metal, and this is what I did. I cut all the holes. I figured all the measurements out from this panel here, what the spacing had to be, and then I transferred it to a piece of metal. And as you see, I had to cut it just like the lens. I used the lens as a template. All the little arches and all, I used that lens as a template to make my metal piece here that I put all the gauges in, as you can see. And when I get done with all this, I'll paint it all black, and you won't see any shiny silver or any of that. All you'll see is the gauges. Okay, now there's a example how it'll look once I put it back in there. When you mount it in there, all the holes line up with this cluster, this clear cluster gauge here. It'll cover all your gauges up. And it'll go in the 7 pins that holds this plastic trim piece in. Will be the same 7 pins. It'll snap right back in place. Also, by saving the housing, you retain the 3 little idiot lights. You have like your oil, your brake light, and temperature light. But anyway, you retain all those. So if you want to use them, you can have those too, and you don't lose anything there. But like I said, then I just hooked the plastic in there as such. Once I paint everything black, you won't see nothing but the black gauges. Now the speedometer, it was a little trick to it. It took me a little more effort. They're only about 1 inch deep, the gauges, but the housing, it's a whole different, I don't know how to explain it, but it had a whole bunch of other things built in because they had your left and right turn signals, all that, so I had to cut all that out. And then I took the original gauge, the original speedometer, and I pulled the face off of it, and then I cut a 4 1/4 inch hole through it so I can use this metal piece as a way to fit back into the plastic lens, and also gives me a way to mount the gauge into this housing as such. As you can see, it goes in here like this. I drilled a hole on each side, one there and one on the other side there, and that way I can mount it into this housing once the gauge is assembled to it. I'll show you that in just a second. Okay, here I am back with the speedometer. The speedometer now, as you can see, I mounted it into that bezel that came off the original speedometer. It's just a spin lock ring on the back, and since I cut the hole, it fits right in there as such. And now I'm going to install it into this housing here, and then they'll all be installed, and then I'll show you how the plastic cover goes in, and it'll fit right back in the console as factory. Okay, I'm back now. I'll show you the finished product after I got all the gauges mounted. This is how I mounted the steering speedometer gauge. I mean, as you notice, there's got a screw there and a screw on the other side, but you won't hardly see those at all once you put the bezel on the front. And plus, once I paint everything black, you won't notice any of that. All you'll see is the gauges only once I put some flat black back on there. As you can see also, I retained all the 7 pins that the factory, that holds the factory lens in. There's 7 of them all across and all around right there, and I retained all those. And I added some extra screws here. I put one here for just to hold the metal plate in a little better, rather than just relying on the pins. And I put one right up the top, and I also put one down here in this corner. What I had to do, I had to drill out the back, as you can see where the 2 nuts are. That way I could run a bolt through those holes, because as you can see how they had where the gauges screwed in the back and they were threaded. So I just drilled them out where I could run a bolt through them, and that's how I holds that plate on. And then down here I had to do a little modifying. That's where your little voltage limiter went, and I took that out and drilled that out and put an extra screw there. As you can see, you still have all your spaces back in the back where you can plug in your lights, your 3 idiot lights. And then there's all your gauges. They just all have slip collars on the back. They just simply screw on the back of that plate that I made. And then, like I said, here's the back of the speedometer gauge I cut out. The first attempt was I was going to try to apply it straight to the back, but the problem with that was the gauge went past the body of the housing, and when you put it in the car, it ended up hitting metal framework on the dash. So I had to rethink it and actually use that bezel on the front. And as you can see, very little passes the actual gauge, just a little bit on the top. It's at an angle, so but it fits in the car nicely, so it don't have no interference at all. There's a lot of time I spent, a lot of R&D, I guess you would say, try fitting different things on this gauge set. But anyway, now that you got it all done, there's your complete cluster where you can work on them at any time. That's another thing I like about the factory setup. You can get to it any time. Just pull off the bezel here, take the 4 screws that holds this whole cluster and take it out of the car. You can do whatever you want. If you have to work on a gauge or whatever, it's no big deal. It'll be a lot easier than doing some kind of just plain flat panel on there. Plus, it'll look factory. That's the look I was looking for. Anyway, once it's all, here it is, and all assembled. There again, it's not all mounted in the car, but you can kind of get an idea how it'll look. But like I said, all the black will be painted in there, so all you'll see is the gauges themselves once I get done with all this. Once it's in the car, and that's how it'll end up looking. As you can see, light there's a little bad. There you go. But anyway, that's my take on it. And for $750, you got a set of better gauges than what the factory ever had. And personally, I think these are even better than the RT gauges, because you got some real high quality speed hut gauges. The GPS speedometer that has multiple settings on it. You can do quarter-mile times on it. It has everything built in that speedometer. You can reset it. It's a trip meter. It tells you everything on that thing. That's a real good gauge. And like I said, I got it where the gauges will turn blue. You can pick any color you want, red, green, whatever, orange. And you can make it where the pointers light up. You can even customize what type of pointers you want. You just call it Speed Hut and tell them what you want, and they build it. And like I said, for $750, you can't get a better set. But that's my take on it. That's a cheap way to go for somebody who's got standard gauges in their Challenger or Cuda and don't want to spend a fortune to convert it to a RT set of gauges, which are, like I said, going for $2,500 and up. And it just, to me, I'd rather have a nice set of custom gauges that I can modify at any time or do whatever. Whereas them other ones, once they break, they cost a fortune to get repaired. So anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. Hope this helps somebody else out there in the same predicament, stuck with standard gauges and don't want to spend a fortune. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I appreciate you watching. Thanks.